Funding for the MacNeil NewsHour has been provided by the professional contractors of NECA and union electricians of IBEW Local 48, providing vision for the future.
Good evening. I'm Robert MacNeil in New York.
And I'm Margaret Warner in Washington. After the news summary, we have two reports on Boris Yeltsin's military and political troubles over Chechnya. Then we have a newsmaker interview with Transportation Secretary Pena, a farewell interview with Republican House Leader Bob Michel, and a Paul Salmon report on the Power Ranger business.
Funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. With ADM ingredients in thousands of consumer products, it's no wonder ADM is called Supermarket to the World. And by New York Life, yet another example of the wise investment philosophy New York Life has been following for the last 150 years. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
Less than a day after a devastating firebomb ripped through a crowded New York subway car, police arrested a suspect in the attack. 45 people were injured when the crudely made device exploded yesterday afternoon in Lower Manhattan. One of those most critically injured was the suspected bomber, 49-year-old Edward Leary. Police cracked the case when the unemployed computer operator asked for medical help after leaving the scene. Evidence was later found at Leary's New Jersey home, allegedly linking him to yesterday's bombing and a similar one a week ago. At a news conference this morning, officials talked about the possible motive.
During the pre-dawn search, investigators uncovered significant evidence. That evidence would seem to point to motive in this incident, and that motive being extortion, to extort money. Investigators are also looking into any links between Wednesday's incident and one in which 3 teenagers were seriously burned earlier this month at the 145th Street station on the IRT. Preliminary findings by the NYPD bomb squad and ATF indicate that materials found at Leary's residence in New Jersey are consistent with both devices.
Police Commissioner Bratton said that the extortion plot may have been aimed at New York's Transit Authority, which runs the subways. Leary, who was burned over 40% of his body, remains under guard at a New York hospital. He could face life in prison if convicted on the 45 counts of attempted murder and assault. Robin?
A homeless man who was shot by U.S. Park Police in front of the White House on Tuesday died last night. Marcelino Corneille was shot in the chest and right leg when he ignored orders to drop a knife he was brandishing at the officers. The White House expressed sorrow over Corneille's death. Presidential spokesperson Dee Dee Myers said the incident underscored the violence in American society. In California, Corneille's family has retained a lawyer to investigate whether police used excessive force.
In economic news, the Commerce Department reported today that the gross domestic product grew more strongly in the third quarter than originally estimated. The revised report now says that third quarter GDP grew at an annual rate of 4%. The GDP measures all goods and services produced in the U.S. The Mexican peso lost nearly 20% of its value today, despite efforts by the U.S. and Canada to prop it up. The currency has tumbled since the Mexican government devalued it earlier this week. The slide has meant heavy losses for North American investors holding pesos and stocks of Mexican companies. An oil spill forced the closing of a busy portion of the lower Mississippi River today. Nearly 38,000 gallons of oil were released into the river after a barge struck an underwater object. Cleanup crews are on the scene.
North Korea today turned over the remains of a helicopter pilot who was killed when his aircraft crashed there last weekend. Army Chief Warrant Officer David Heilemann died in the accident. His co-pilot, Bobby Hull, survived and remains in custody. Heilemann's remains were returned in a ceremony at a border town between the two countries. The body was accompanied by Congressman Bill Richardson, who's been acting as an intermediary for the Clinton administration. Richardson said North Korea has agreed to return Warrant Officer Hall very soon, but there's no word yet on when that might occur.
The fighting in Chechnya escalated today. About 24 people were killed when Russian forces launched several airstrikes against the capital, Grozny. It was the heaviest fighting since Chechnya's bid for independence. We'll have more on Chechnya right after the news summary. In Bosnia, 2 people were killed when artillery shells slammed into a market in Sarajevo today. 7 others were also wounded. UN envoy Akashi called the attack outrageous, but he said both sides were close to finalizing the details of a 4-month ceasefire that is scheduled to begin tomorrow.
Italy's Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi resigned today just after 7 months in office. Berlusconi quit ahead of a scheduled no-confidence vote in Parliament. The media tycoon turned politician was under investigation for alleged bribes to tax inspectors. He'll remain in a caretaker position while a new government is formed. It would be Italy's 54th since 1945.
White House Press Secretary Dee Dee Myers held her last briefing for reporters today. The 33-year-old former Clinton campaign worker is the first woman to serve in that position. Myers' resignation comes several weeks after White House Chief of Staff Leon Panetta made it clear he wanted someone else for the job. At today's briefing, she got some praise from an unexpected visitor.
I just wanted to come in here and say in front of all you how very grateful I am for everything Dee Dee has done for me since long before I became president, starting in our campaign. I reminded her the first trip we took together, I was on a little bitty airplane and I fell asleep, which was some sort of omen about how helpful I would be in answering difficult questions. And we've had a wonderful professional relationship. We've had a good personal friendship. I think she is one of the best people I have ever had the privilege of working with, and I'm really going to miss her.
State Department spokesman Mike McCurry is expected to replace Myers. During this morning's briefing, spokeswoman Myers criticized a lucrative book deal made recently by incoming House Speaker Newt Gingrich. The Georgia Republican has reportedly accepted a $4 million advance from a publishing company owned by media magnate Rupert Murdoch. Myers said the deal raises serious ethical questions. Gingrich called the Myers statements silly.
That's our summary of the top stories. Now it's on to the fighting in Chechnya, the Transportation Secretary, Bob Michael of Illinois, and the Power Ranger business.
First tonight, the Russian army's effort to subdue rebels in the rebel province of Chechnya and the increasing political turmoil the military action has caused Russian President Boris Yeltsin. There were reports today that disagreements over the Chechnya policy in Moscow led to the firing of 6 top officers. We have 2 independent television news reports from Gabi Rado in Moscow and Andrew Simmons in the capital of Chechnya.
In an uneasy calm, the people of Grozny tried to do what they could after the heaviest night of bombing since the Russian invasion started. The sound of aircraft had caused no alarm. Ordinary people believing it's safer to go out in daylight. Bombing at night, reconnaissance by day had been the tactic of the Russian Air Force, until today, as we were filming. It's 11 days since the Russians invaded, and this is the closest they've come to the presidential palace, just about 700 yards down the road. This attack came without any warning whatsoever, and as you can see, civilians are all around. A short distance away, the appalling aftermath of what Russia has called precision bombing. These people weren't separatist fighters, mafia gunmen, or even soldiers. Help me, this woman cries. Bombs and missiles rained down on this city. We counted dozens of dead, most of them civilians. And in Moscow, they say the Air Force is hitting strategic targets. Amongst the dead, an American woman freelance photographer. This is the carnage of daylight bombing, which despite the advanced technology of a former superpower proved inaccurate. But as Grozny tried to absorb this, the biggest bombardment since President Yeltsin ordered his troops in, General Dadaev was still claiming that his people had 2 choices, either death or freedom. Looking at Grozny's hospitals, which are filled to overflowing, mostly with civilians, it comes as no surprise that senior Russian officers are refusing to advance on this tiny republic. But the might of Russia's Air Force, with its awesome firepower, fell down on Grozny's people today, and despite the carnage, many seemed able to carry on with the suffering.
The Russian Defense Ministry, rocked by corruption scandals earlier in the year, is now clearly in the throes of an even more serious crisis. The conflicting reports of the sacking of 6 top officers suggest a disastrous collapse of confidence. Word leaked out this afternoon that General Eduard Vorobyov, deputy commander of ground troops, had handed in his resignation. Later came a report, now denied, that he was among the 6 officers sacked. The man behind the original leak, chairman of the Parliamentary Defense Committee, Sergei Yushchenkov, is a former Yeltsin supporter disillusioned with the president over the Chechnya issue. A one-time army colonel, he voices dissident officers' feelings.
First of all, the destruction of armed gangs is not a job for an army, but for police and other special forces. Secondly, in Chechnya, we're not talking about armed gangs, but armed people. Naturally, any general who understands he's not fighting against armed gangs, but against armed people, armed civilians, cannot take responsibility for such a shameful war.
The discontent among senior officers is another personal embarrassment for Defense Minister Grachov. He visited Grozny just 3 weeks ago and claimed he'd successfully averted a conflict in talks with the Chechen leader Djokhar Dudayev. Just days later, Russian troops were sent in. Very soon after that, there was clear mutiny in the Russian officer corps. Major General Ivan Babichov refused to move his armor any nearer Grozny, stating that threatening civilians there was against the constitution. Russian ground forces have in fact largely kept to the military plan of encircling Grozny. Latest reports say they've dug in on all sides except the south. Moscow has in recent days been stressing that on the ground at least, it's prepared to play a waiting game to avoid high casualties inflicted in street-by-street fighting. Many of the Chechen fighters have taken advantage of the Russian strategy and regrouped in the mountains to the south. Those who understand the Caucasus privately forecast that Russian forces will be faced with a long guerrilla war. In Moscow, there are claims that the Muslim Chechens have been joined in their hideouts by fundamentalists from Islamic states. The government is concerned that a religious element is entering the conflict.
We categorically deny that there is any confrontation between Russia and the Muslim world. On the contrary, Russia is interested in the development of a constructive dialogue with the Muslim world. In the case of Chechnya, it is a case of fighting not Muslims, but bandits. You are all aware that there are people other than Muslims living in Chechnya.
The Russian Duma voted this morning to hold a special joint session with the upper house of parliament on Saturday to debate the Chechnya crisis. A measure of the political chaos enveloping Moscow was this evening's publication of a letter from President Yeltsin refusing to attend the joint session, which needs his presence to make it legitimate. The president knows that there's an overwhelming majority in both houses against his Chechnya policy. He's embarked on yet another highly damaging confrontation with the elected parliament.
Among President Yeltsin's critics are a number of economic reformers, including former Prime Minister Yegor Gaidar. He has called for Yeltsin's impeachment over the Chechnya policy.
Next tonight, questions about the nation's transportation system. As Christmas approaches, those traveling by air face renewed concerns about safety on commuter airlines. Train riders may have heard last week's announcement of cutbacks on Amtrak. And those who take to the highways or even the crosstown bus to visit relatives may wonder how cutbacks announced earlier this week and new Washington politics will affect their travel in the future. For some answers, we're now joined by the Secretary of Transportation, Federico Peña. He joins us from the White House briefing room. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us.
How are you? Happy to be here.
You announced an aviation framework agreement with Canada today. Why is it needed? What's it expected to do?
It's amazing that here we have the two most market-oriented economies in the world, where Canada is our largest trading partner, and we have one of the most restrictive aviation agreements in the entire hemisphere, making it very difficult for Americans or Canadians to fly back and forth, and of course, I think, depressing the opportunities of the North American Free Trade Agreement, etc. So after 12 failed attempts that have been tried in years past, We finally have reached a new framework agreement. We will begin formal negotiations in early January. Hope to complete those very soon. It is absolutely critical to both of our countries, to the hemisphere, but most importantly to consumers, because right now we have a very regulated aviation environment where prices have to be approved by the government, routes are restricted, and eventually we will, in a sense, have the same kind of domestic aviation service with Canada, and you probably won't notice the difference.
Well, how will consumers notice the difference?
They'll notice reduced fares. They will have far more opportunities to fly to many more cities in Canada and vice versa. There will be more competition, and I think in terms of business communication and tourism, there will be an explosion of economic opportunities for U.S. and Canadian business people and, of course, for tourism. So it is a win-win for both countries, and we were very excited to make the announcement today.
Turning to your department, President Clinton has announced big cuts there, as well as some other places in the budget, $6.7 billion over 5 years. How is the public going to feel those cuts?
Well, first of all, those cuts result from a number of things. We're going to consolidate our department. We have about 10 different agencies there today. We'll consolidate those down to 3. We'll take the 30 different programs that we have, whether they're grants or loans or subsidies, combine those to 3. We're going to give the states and the mayors much more flexibility, much more authority in how to use these monies and try to provide them in a block grant. We're going to create state infrastructure banks, which we will capitalize with federal dollars, but for every dollar we put into those state infrastructure banks, they'll be leveraged 2, 3, or 4 more times, which means that there'll be more construction, more investment in transportation infrastructure throughout the country. And lastly, we will retain a federal fund to invest in projects that are of national importance or regional importance. For example, if someone wanted to build a high-speed rail system across 5 states, there would be a national fund to help deal with that and help coordinate that. So there'll still be a national presence, but I think much more flexibility to the states, to the cities, and most importantly, shrinking the size of my department. My department, when I came here 2 years ago, was 109,000 people. By the time we're through, we'll be down to about 55,000 people. We'll take 40,000 air traffic controllers and put them into a corporate-like structure, which will make it much more efficient. But the bottom line is I'll be able to tell taxpayers that your tax dollars are being used much more efficiently, much more strategically, and we'll have more transportation investment.
A high-speed rail link across 5 states is a pipe dream, isn't it, today?
Not necessarily.
No?
There are a number of states that have a great interest in high-speed rail systems. Florida, California, state of Texas, and other states along the Northeast. And we think that long-term, there is a federal role to play to help synchronize those decisions so that we can bring those states together. Obviously, there'll be a lot of investment from the states and hopefully from the private sector. So I wouldn't say it's a total pipe dream.
Just back to what you said a moment ago, you said mayors and governors would have more flexibility, but the reality is they're going to have less money or have to provide more of it from their own state taxpayers than from the federal government. Is that right?
There will be some reduction in the federal...
For money to build highways and pave streets and repair and build airports and so on.
Yeah, there will be some reduction in those federal dollars, but remember when I discussed the infrastructure banks, what we're hearing from states and governors and others is they would like more flexibility to allow them to finance projects that they otherwise can't do today. So we will provide them that flexibility, and we believe that for every dollar from the federal government we invest, that will multiply 4 or 5 times than currently invested, so that at the end of the day, let's assume it were $19.99 today, we would be able to say that we have probably 5, 6, 7, maybe $10 billion more being invested in our transportation infrastructure, because you'll have now private sector involvement, you'll have more states and cities involved with the federal dollars. And that's what I think the American people want us to do, is leverage and combine the resources of both the federal, state, local governments, and the private sector.
A lot of the money you pay out for these projects comes from the highway and air travel taxes and trust funds, does it not? Does that mean you're going to keep back some of that trust fund money that pays in highway taxes or in airline taxes and not give as much of it out to the states?
Not necessarily. Right now, the federal government has about a 14-cent federal gas tax and a 10-cent ticket tax on anybody who buys a ticket. And those are separate trust funds that we have in Washington and we will keep those trust funds. I think that over time, those trust funds will be spent down because for a long time, large surpluses have been built up in those trust funds, and we were not using that money. I think now we'll begin to spend those trust funds down and use the money for the purposes for which they were intended.
Officials of your department are quoted as saying that in addition to that, you're going to reduce what you spend for subsidizing mass rail transit. Is that correct?
There will probably be some reduction in our subsidization of mass transit, but there will still be a transit operating assistance program, which is, I think, what you're referring to, because we still strongly believe that transit is very important to metropolitan communities all over our country, and those transit systems are key to mobility, to reducing air pollution, and to eliminating congestion in our very large and even our rural metropolitan communities.
Amtrak has just announced big cuts in its passenger service because of its own deficit this year. Does what you just said mean that you're going to be cutting the Amtrak federal subsidy even more, and consequently they may have to make even more service cuts?
We hope that there will not have...
It's about $1 billion a year now, 900 and something
It's
million
a little,
dollars.
that's right, it's a little less than that. Amtrak was going to experience about a $200 million loss this year,
Right.
and I supported the board of Amtrak in making its decisions to look at its route structure, to begin to eliminate those routes which were losing lots of money. There was no market reason to have those routes. We will continue to provide some level of subsidy for Amtrak because we believe that Amtrak should be a viable rail passenger system for our country, and I am very confident that the board and Mr. Downs, the president of Amtrak, have made the right decision to get Amtrak back on a strong financial footing so the American people can continue to ride Amtrak, and hopefully over time we can begin to rebuild it as it becomes financially stronger.
But still, the message is the subsidy, which is now nearly $1 billion, will be less than that under these cuts. You'll be lowering that subsidy, so Amtrak will be forced to make even further service cuts.
Well, not because of that. Remember, the decision that Amtrak just made reduces its total operation by about 20%. So since the total route structure is reduced by about 20%, you don't need the same subsidy that we used to provide. It'll be a smaller amount, but there will still be a subsidy for Amtrak. We will be supportive of Amtrak. We believe it's very important for our country, and I have a great confidence in the board, in its decisions, and I think the American people will be pleased with the new business orientation that we're bringing to the Amtrak operations.
The incoming chairman of the House Transportation Committee, Republican Bud Schuster of Pennsylvania, said today Amtrak is on a life support system and it's a disaster. It needs to get off that system. In other words, suggesting that subsidies need to be replaced by private partnerships and with private companies and state and local governments. Do you agree with that philosophy, that
Well,
subsidy needs to be ended?
I met with Congressman Schuster very recently, and we talked about Amtrak. He told me that he was pleased with the decision that Amtrak had made. He was concerned, as I was, that had the Amtrak board not made those decisions, I think there would have been a great move in the Congress to totally eliminate any funding of Amtrak. Now that Amtrak has demonstrated that it's putting its financial house in order, I think it has a very strong argument to make to the Congress that there still is a legitimate reason for continued assistance to Amtrak, given its new focus on financial stability. And I think Congressman Schuster and I are of like minds on that question, and we are hopeful we can continue to be supportive of Amtrak.
So you don't expect the Republican majority in the Congress to eliminate or attempt to eliminate, which has been tried before, the operating subsidy for Amtrak?
I think there will be some effort by some to eliminate the payments to Amtrak. We are prepared, however, to argue that since the Amtrak board has now made a business-like decision, there is now a business plan in effect, that over time Amtrak will do business much better, to argue for continued congressional support, because there will be confidence that those congressional dollars will be used wisely and effectively and will benefit the American people. Had the Amtrak board not made the decision it made a week or so ago, I think Congress would have had many more reasons to essentially pull the plug on Amtrak. I think now we've got a good argument to make, a good presentation to present to the Congress, and we're hoping that they'll continue to be supportive of Amtrak.
You said let's turn to airlines now. You said last week after the latest commuter air crash that you were troubled about the number of airline accidents this year. You announced a survey, a safety survey of all the airlines and tighter regulations for pilot training and so on commuter airlines. You and the FAA Commissioner, Mr. Hinson, promised the Congress that you would bring in new rules on commuter pilot training last spring. Why are they only announced now, nearly 9 months later, after more accidents?
Well, Robert, I'm glad you asked that question. I think there is a misunderstanding of the facts here. We started 2 years ago to elevate the levels of safety for the small aircraft, the 30 seats and less, the commuter aircraft, to the same standards of the large aircraft. We started that first with de-icing, which we did in 1993. We have done that with ground proximity warning devices, which we did earlier this year. And we did start on the pilot crew training regulations. What we announced very recently is that we were going to accelerate the rulemaking that we had already started many, many months ago and add even new standards and new regulations so that within 100 days we will complete that rulemaking, at least have it out for public comment, and basically synchronize or elevate all of the major safety standards that apply to large aircraft to apply to smaller aircraft. This administration, Administrator Hinson and this Secretary of Transportation have spent a lot of time on safety, and we have acted, I think, in a very responsible fashion, ensuring that the American people that safety will continue to be our highest standard.
There's been a lot of criticism of the FAA. You're the agency, the Federal Aviation Administration, which comes under your department. In the last week or so after these accidents, it's been accused, as it has in the past, of a tombstone mentality or a body count safety policy of only tightening safety standards after crashes. How do you respond to that?
I would agree that that criticism, which was lodged against the FAA many, many years ago, and has been a problem and a concern of mine, we have addressed. Since I have been Secretary of Transportation and since Administrator Hinson has been in his position under this administration, we have accelerated our rulemaking. We have emphasized safety in a way that I think the American people can have confidence in. We have grounded aircraft where they needed to be grounded, such as the ATR. We have grounded airlines, such as Kiwi Airlines and Leisure Air, where they needed to be grounded. We have grounded pilots where they were not satisfying safety rules. So wherever we need to take tough action, we will do that. In January, I will have a face-to-face day-and-a-half meeting with the administrator. We've invited all of the airline executives, their chief pilots, to have a very intensive session on how we can do better, how we can take the improving safety record that we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years and make it even better.
How would you, just the final question, how would you respond to the incoming chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, who told the Mr. Pressler, who told the New York Times, "I found the FAA to be unresponsive and insensitive and reluctant to do their job. There's clearly a problem there," he said.
I would say to Senator Pressler that some time ago, prior to the time that this new administration came on board, there were many concerns raised like the senator has raised, and I would suggest to him and others that since I have been Secretary of Transportation and we have had our new administrator, we have run this agency much differently. We have accelerated our rulemaking. We have taken tough actions. We have focused more on consumers and their needs, and we have, I think, brought a much more aggressive safety program than perhaps we have historically seen in the FAA. I am not here to talk about what happened prior to the time that I was here. I am absolutely happy to discuss with the Senate the actions that I have taken and that the new administrator has taken, who has been here for about a year.
Well, Mr. Pena, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Still ahead on the NewsHour, Congressman Bob Michael and the Power Rangers story. Next tonight, Bob Michael. As Republicans prepare to take control of the House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years, the man who was their minority leader for 14 years, Bob Michael, is moving into retirement. Congressional correspondent Kwame Holman reports.
Chair would like to ask my distinguished Republican colleague if he would take the chair. Will the gentleman please take the chair?
On the last day of the 103rd Congress, just after the vote approving the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, House Speaker Tom Foley afforded Republican leader Bob Michel a rare opportunity, a chance to take the Speaker's chair temporarily, to wield the gavel, to feel the power. During 14 years as Minority Leader, Michel often joked about his dream of one day becoming Speaker, but it will not be. When the new 104th Congress convenes in January and Republicans assume control, Newt Gingrich will become House Speaker and Bob Michel will retire from public life.
Congressman, is there any irony to be found in the fact that you have been in the minority for almost 40 years now, and finally the Republicans are in the majority and you're retiring?
Oh, well, there's no question about it. You know, you look to it. I've never was possessed or, with the ambition that, oh boy, I'm going to be a failure unless I became Speaker. Although, obviously, that's got to be in your old picture book out there, because that's what the name of the game is, becoming a majority party. And yes, now that we're there, I guess I'll just be relegated to being an observer on the side. But I have no regrets in having made my decision, because I'm getting up in those years when I think the job probably demands somebody who had the vitality and that I had when I was a young, early freshman member of the Congress. After 38 years and 8 years in AA, it's, the edge isn't as sharp, and I recognize that.
For Michel, this last year in Congress has been filled with nostalgic tributes, tearful goodbyes, and from the White House, the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
In a very real sense, he represents, in my view, the heart of America, the values of America, and the sense of fairness of America. I have...
Bob Michel was first sent to Congress in 1956, representing the people in and around Peoria, Illinois. He gradually worked his way up through the Republican leadership, and in 1981 was elected Minority Leader by his colleagues, becoming President Reagan's point person in the House.
My most exhilarating days were 81 and 82, when we put together the Reagan Revolution with the tax cuts and lowering marginal tax rates and the expenditure cuts, and those were good heady days. I held together 192 Republicans solid, and reached over, had the temperament to pick up 27, 8, 9 votes on the Democratic side to win 7 straight votes by 3 or 4 vote margin. Now that was, as I said, my heyday. I loved it. It was exhilarating, and that's what I thought I did best.
Back then, Michel says, he found it easy, even a pleasure, to work with the majority Democrats. His friendship with House Speaker Thomas Tip O'Neill endured, even when they disagreed. For instance, on the issue of continued U.S. aid to the Contra rebels in their war against Nicaragua's Marxist government.
Mr. Speaker, I love you. We're great friends. I respect your sincerity. I know the emotional issue that this is with you. I think I know something special about that I won't relate here. But I just have to say, today, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Tip O'Neill and I used to talk about how we could go hammer and tongs, and still after it's over, we could sit down and play gin or have a brew or one thing or another, on the weekend go play golf.
But Michel's relationship with O'Neill's successor, Jim Wright, was strained. Wright's iron-fisted control of House affairs and forays into U.S. foreign policy infuriated Republicans and eroded the traditional comity between the two parties. The two leaders' deep ideological differences came to a head over Contra aid.
There's no way you can save the Democratic resistance as a meaningful force if you vote this package down. Look what you do to their morale. How do you suppose you can sustain them in the field? What recourse do they have out there on their own?
Michel's relationship with Wright bottomed out when Wright opened his own diplomatic channel with Nicaragua's Marxist president, Daniel Ortega.
You were very opposed to that. Was that a major part of your problem?
Well, I think that was, but we could still sit down and, quietly. It was never any acrimony between us personally when we sat down together. But I think the image that was projected was such that here, two real fierce adversaries, and it really extended to their personal relationship in addition to the professional arguments that had to be made on the particular issue.
Michael's good friend, Congressman Henry Hyde, is less forgiving of Wright.
Jim had this agenda that was not only to take over foreign policy, especially in Central America, but really had contempt for Reagan and the Reagan administration. And so we all had to react to that, and we did instinctively react against Mr. Wright, and he paid an awful price for, I think, attempting much too much.
Jim Wright eventually resigned under the pressure of an ethics investigation of profits he made on a book deal. But it wasn't Bob Michael who had spearheaded the campaign against Wright. It was a little-known but very aggressive House Republican from Georgia, Newt Gingrich.
I think he's clearly, based on the public record, the least ethical speaker in the 20th century.
Gingrich's role in Jim Wright's political undoing was a major factor in his rise to power, and it served notice on the Democrats that the congenial style of politics practiced by Bob Michael no longer would be the Republican style.
I don't fault Bob Michael at all. I am more comfortable with Bob Michael's style. Bob is a thorough gentleman, but Newt is aggressive, and maybe it's time for aggression.
Freshman Congresswoman Deborah Price of Ohio, a close ally of Gingrich's, agrees that Bob Michael's style of politicking has run its course.
The fact of the matter is he represented and he reflected an era, and that era, like it or not, is gone. An era when people were nicer to each other. The floor of the House was more gentlemanly. There weren't too many ladies around at that point in time. But it's a different time now, and like it or not, this is the time we live in, and his leadership style probably isn't as well adapted to what we are living through politically now.
Gingrich gradually assumed ideological leadership of House Republicans, although Bob Michael remained their elected leader. At times, Michael matched Gingrich's firebrand opposition to Democrats' control of the House, as at the swearing-in of Speaker Tom Foley.
No political party, no man or woman in the House, no faction, no ideology has a monopoly on virtue. Human folly is an equal opportunity employer. No, there is no monopoly on virtue. But for over 35 years, there has been a monopoly of power in the House. 35 years of uninterrupted power can act like a corrosive acid upon the restraints of civility and comity.
How did the Democratic monopoly affect the institution?
Well, each one of us, freely elected from 435 districts, are entitled to represent our constituents' views in that body. And when it's denied and cut off summarily to the degree that it's impossible for that to happen, those constituents are denied full representation in the House of Representatives. That's what happened over that period of time when the rules became tighter and tighter and more closed. And the statistics will show that the number of what we call closed rules, very tight, one amendment or one substitute, are just mushroomed.
Why do you think the Democrats did that, something that you think is so detrimental?
Well, simply because they had, before this last election, an 80-vote margin in the House. Hey, we run this place. It's going to be our way. We got the votes, and we're going to do it our way. And so we just don't have to be troubled and bothered with this extensive debate. In the final analysis, we got the votes, and we're going to carry the day.
Right through the recently adjourned 103rd Congress, it seemed no major House floor debate was complete without an appearance by an agitated Bob Michael.
You on the Democratic side have the votes to beat us down today, but this isn't the end of the fight. It's just the beginning. How many times have we been had on our side of the aisle by the rules of this House? This is a procedural vote, and it means whether or not we can make an impact and a difference on cleaning up a bad bill. That's what it's all about. and you ought to take advantage of that opportunity. Don't let it slip through your fingers when it's right at hand.
But Bob Michel says now that Republicans are in the majority, they should not copy the Democrats' heavy-handed tactics.
I told Newt as he takes over, I said, now, remember, two wrongs don't make a right. And where they might have erred on some of these things, I think we ought to hold the line on what's fair and reasonable and right.
The relationship between Bob Michel and Newt Gingrich has been one of the most delicate and interesting to watch in Washington. Michel acknowledges Gingrich would have challenged him for the top leadership job this year had he not retired, and it's unlikely Gingrich ever would have been Michel's choice to lead the Republicans. Years ago, when he had a chance to groom a successor, Michel picked a soft-spoken congressman from Wyoming, Dick Cheney.
I just saw in Dick Cheney not only a good friend and competent individual from our having dealt before, that here's a man that ought to have replaced me someday and move him into the whip's spot.
But in 1989, when the Senate rejected John Tower's nomination to be Secretary of Defense, President George Bush plucked Cheney from the Congress. That gave Newt Gingrich an opportunity to challenge for the number 2 position among House Republicans. And by a margin of 2 votes, he defeated another of Bob Michel's hand-picked candidates, Ed Madigan of Illinois. Michel was gracious in defeat.
There's such a frustration on our side at being mired down in a minority, of 80 votes or more, that there were any number of people who would say, but Bob, don't we have to just change something? Let's do something, and dramatic and different. And Newt, no question about, during his tenure in the Congress, has been an activist. And I guess there's certainly a time for activists with good goals.
Michel and Gingrich also have had their public differences. Michel says he was undercut by Gingrich in 1990 after tense budget negotiations between congressional leaders and the White House at Andrews Air Force Base finally led to a compromise package.
And it wasn't until we got actually into the cabinet room of the White House, when first was evident to me that Newt was making a break and couldn't wait at that time probably to go out and tell the press that this was the route he was taking.
It is my conclusion that it will kill jobs, weaken the economy, that the tax increase will be counterproductive, and that it is not a package which I could support.
The result of it, very few people talk about it today, it cost us $20 billion of tax reduction and $20 billion of tax increases, because eventually what the compromise was much worse than what we originally had. And that was done because we had a defection.
But Michel says he and Gingrich have long since straightened out their differences and now have a good relationship.
Oh, sure. I mean, Newt is he's smart, he's well-read, he's a historian, he's got a great sense of history, he's articulate, he's energetic and an indefatigable worker. As I said, those are the pluses. If there's a criticism, Newt, there's too many balls in the air at the same time. I've had to say, Newt, I think your weakness is one of follow-through, and you don't have to comment on everything. And sometimes I've found it's very good. So, well, I'll think about that and let you know. And to sleep on it overnight, your answer may be a little bit different than caught unawares and thinking that anything you say or that comes out is going to be right.
As for his own future, Bob Michel says he'll split time between hometown Peoria and Washington, D.C., doing volunteer work, maybe some teaching, and visiting with old friends in the new majority.
I like to kind of come back and sneak in the back door and check in on things once in a while. I won't, I didn't get to savor it as an active member, but I can enjoy it from the outside.
He leaves the Congress as the Republican minority leader, having set an example Democrats might now choose to follow.
House will be in order.
Finally tonight, the shopper's nightmare. It seems every Christmas there's one item that everyone wants, and it's in short supply. Well, this year is no exception. Business correspondent Paul Salmon of WGBH Boston reports.
This Christmas, it's a small world of marketing. There's a miracle afoot on 34th Street and just about everywhere else in the world, it seems. To us, it's a case study in business strategy with marketing messages for all. The Power Rangers are the hottest toy item since Cabbage Patch Dolls, an international craze raging right now from Takashimaya in Tokyo to Toys R Us in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
It's hot. You know it's hot.
Can't find them anywhere. Anywhere.
Look up there.
Now, at stores like FAO Schwartz on Fifth Avenue, they are stocked to the rafters. Power Ranger merchandise will top $1 billion in sales this year. But the hot items are in very short supply, especially the White Ranger and his various accessories. In the Boston Globe, for example, a coveted white Tiger Zord, $39.99 retail, is being scalped for $300 COD.
Go, Power!
And even the NewsHour family has fallen victim to the craze. This is the son of our economics producer, Laurie Cohen, and this, via home video, is her closet, a virtual safe deposit box for hoarding Power Rangers. And producer Lee Korumvokas has collected treasures which, in a few years, could pay for her kids' college education. Though, frankly, Lee's son Victor, 4½, would probably trade tomorrow's diploma for today's Green Ranger.
I like Green Ranger and White Ranger. Green Ranger can fight the Megazord.
And it's not just toys. Laurie's son Jeremy, 5½, is almost a fashion model for the Power Ranger line.
Oh, they're Power Rangers.
Oh, this is my Power Ranger raincoat.
Your Power Ranger raincoat. I see, there they are.
This is the Blue Ranger.
Blue Ranger.
This.
Uh-huh.
This is the green.
The green. Oh, and they're morphed right there.
Now, in the interests of journalistic fairness, not every NewsHour child has succumbed. This is Sophie Crawford Brown, 7-year-old daughter of one of our senior producers. Sophie bucked the craze this Halloween by dressing up as her favorite character, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Mozart. You went to the Halloween party, and how was everyone else dressed?
Power Rangers.
But frankly, the magic of Mozart doesn't stand a chance against the deafening hype of Go, Go, Power Rangers! The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is the #1 kids' TV show in the world, seen in more than 30 countries, with another 40+ ready to go. Originally, the show was made in Japan. It's a program that was tacky to begin with, but when arch-villain Rita Repulsa and company were exported to America for a U.S. version, the show seemed positively tongue-in-cheek.
Big. Don't tell me I can't, because I am, you don't!
You may have noticed that Rita's been dubbed into English. That's because the U.S. show has saved money by recycling much of the Japanese original.
Power Rangers, I need you at the command center immediately.
The key characters, however, are recast. The Power Rangers themselves, a multi-ethnic, multi-talented group of teenage good guys and gals. Their greatest talent? Morphing. The Rangers often morph cheaply into Japanese production numbers. Even more cost-effective, it turns out, is that the same masked figures can be sold everywhere the show airs. In fact, the show debuts in a country only when the toys are ready to go on the shelf. This is truly global marketing, though Harvard's Steve Grazer thinks it's more luck than strategy.
I don't think this is a great example of global branding. I think it's a good example of how an idea has global legs. The worldwide appeal of Power Rangers is rooted in the fact that when the characters morph, they have no racial or ethnic look. Consequently, the show has the potential to appear to be indigenous in a lot of places in the world.
So in this era of global marketing, we can infer our first practical tip. Think globally, start locally. Okay, time for lesson number 2. Shortages can be good. And there are shortages of key Power Ranger toys this Christmas. Toy shortages are a normal occurrence, of course, especially around the holidays. Parents and grandparents search high and low for items that seem in infuriatingly short supply. But many think this year's Ranger shortages are not normal, but deliberate. including NewsHour producer Lee Korumvokas.
Look around. There are none of the cool toys here. I mean, this, you know, the game, the pinball machine, these costumes, these are not, if you're a 4 to 8-year-old boy, these are not cool. You can find these anywhere.
Now, the charge of phony shortages is a grave one and demands a response from Saban of Southern California, the company that licenses the product. So we enlisted another member of the NewsHour family, LA correspondent Jeffrey Kay, to put the tough question to Peter Dang.
Did you guys purposely hold back to try to create a shortage and increase the demand?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think from a business standpoint, it's very stupid. Because you never ever know the lifetime of a toy. And on top of that, when you're hot, especially in the toy business, you want to exploit it.
But no matter if these shortages are purposeful or not, to business school professor Adam Brandenberger, the benefits are the same and substantial.
So shortages can have two effects. The first is that they can actually make products more desirable. The simple fact that they're scarce can enhance their appeal.
This is your lucky day.
The second effect concerns the age-old struggle between manufacturers and retailers. Huge chains have been calling the shots in recent years, but shortages shift the power back to manufacturers away from retailers.
So now the retailers suddenly find themselves competing for product. They're no longer in the driving seat, and the manufacturer gets to determine the shelf space allocation for its product. It's able to negotiate better payment terms. If you like, the Mighty Morphins now have all the power.
And this illustrates our second marketing insight: shortages can be good for suppliers. But the third and final point modifies the second, because gold rushes can finish ugly, as exemplified by our next example. Lucy Sachs now sells souvenir T-shirts in 30 stores nationwide. In the early 80s, she too had a holiday craze, Lucy's Laces, and it almost wiped her out.
I put them in my stores. They sold like hotcakes, but the companies really couldn't provide me with the inventory fast enough. So there was this constant, chomping at the bit of my customers and the stores who wanted to buy from me to get the product. And basically, as the whole shoelace market was going up, I didn't have the merchandise, and then as the fad was going down, I was getting the merchandise. And so I ended up with a lot of inventory that I just couldn't get rid of. I mean, it was a nightmare. I almost lost, everything that I had. I almost lost my house and my business.
And Sachs still has a few shoelaces to spare, because in the time it took to gear up for the fad had faded. In terms of Power Rangers, the story of Lucy's Laces brings us inevitably to what a Scrooge might call the question of Christmas future. Just how long before the Rangers lose their magic? Well, Victor Coos is still in their thrall, as is clear from this home video of him watching the show, taken by his mom, the producer. And our other producer, Laurie Cohen, was still loading up just last week to satisfy her son's passion, which he shared with virtually every one of his classmates at a school Halloween party. But when a craze seems to have affected just about everyone, maybe its days are numbered. What does Jeremy now want for Christmas?
There's this real fun thing that I keep seeing on TV.
What is it?
It's called Dr. Dreadful's Food Lab.
Dr. Dreadful, the latest toy craze, at least in the TV ad.
Makes lots of gross things, and then you eat them.
So in the toy business, it can be here today, gone tomorrow. Moreover, the bigger and faster the fad, quite often, the further the fall. And in the toy business, few fads have grown so big, so fast, as the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. But the Saban company has a plan to postpone, maybe even prevent, an ugly finish. In the short term, they're pumping out toys as fast as they can, or so they say, and they'll be introducing them in more and more countries, along with the TV show. But most significantly, the show itself is being transformed into the generally more durable soap opera form with frequently changing characters.
So, for instance, this year, we introduced a new alien leader. We introduced a new ranger, a white ranger. And we introduced 3 new rangers, all that is evolving within a storyline.
And as Peter Dang's colleague Stan Golden explains about the toys,
the merchandise will evolve as the characters evolve on screen.
Which could mean, when all is said and done, that the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers may be around for many Christmases to come.
Again, the major stories of this Thursday. Police arrested an unemployed computer operator in yesterday's firebombing of a crowded New York subway. The nation's economy showed stronger than expected growth in the third quarter. And North Korea returned the body of an American pilot whose helicopter crashed in its territory. The surviving co-pilot remains in custody. Good night, Margaret.
Good night, Robin. That's it for the NewsHour tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow evening. I'm Margaret Warner. Good night.
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. With ADM ingredients in thousands of consumer products, it's no wonder ADM is called Supermarket to the World. And by New York Life, yet another example of the wise investment philosophy New York Life has been following for the last 150 years. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
Video cassettes of the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour are available from PBS Video. Call 1-800